What would you do if someone kicked your door in at 3 a.m., wearing a badge, barking orders, and claiming you broke HOA rules? That happened to us. But he didn't expect my 12-year-old son, trained calm and ready to protect his home. What followed shocked the whole neighborhood. It was the kind of night that made you forget anything bad could happen. Calm, silent, with a cool breeze drifting through the trees outside. Our little cul-de-sac had always been peaceful. Just another quiet corner of suburbia where the biggest complaint was someone forgetting trash day. I had fallen asleep on the couch, a movie still playing quietly on the TV. Tanya and Caleb were upstairs in bed. It was past 3 a.m. when I stirred. It's not from the sound of the TV, but something else squeaking floorboards. At first I thought it was the dog, but we didn't have one. Then maybe it was the old heating system, till I heard the knob twist. Before I could even get up, the front door exploded open with a thunderous crack. The whole house shook. A figure stepped inside, tall, bulky, and clad in a black tactical vest. The man's voice boomed through the hallway. HOA inspection. You've been warned. I was frozen for half a second, then jolted to my feet. Upstairs, I heard movement, Tanya's panicked footsteps. Something else. Caleb shifting. The man didn't look like any cop I'd ever seen. His gear looked cheap, his boots mismatched. He held a flashlight and some kind of identification, flashed it quickly like he didn't want me to look too close. You violated Community Code 7C, he barked. That porch light color isn't authorized. I have the authority to inspect and cite immediately. He took 2 bold steps inside. I stood between him and the living room, gripping a wooden bat we kept near the door for emergencies. I didn't swing, but yet Tanya had already disappeared, probably into the closet. I knew she'd be calling 911. Good. The guy was still barking HOA rules like they were criminal law. This isn't how HOA violations work, I said, my voice firm. He glared at me. Sir, I'm acting under the approval of the enforcement committee. I can't detain you until security arrives. That's when I got my first clear look at his badge. It wasn't even metal, just plastic with a printed seal. The words Community Enforcement Officer looked like they were typed on someone's old inkjet printer. Still, the man kept advancing, ignoring every boundary. Where's your porch report? You didn't respond to your 3rd notice. He stepped toward our hallway like he knew the layout of the house. I had a sick feeling in my gut. This wasn't about porch lights. This wasn't HOA business. This man had come here for something else. And my son and wife were upstairs. I took a step back, toward the stairs, buying time. We'll deal with this in daylight, I told him. Not at 3 in the morning. He didn't stop, just smirked and said, some people only learn when they get a visit. Upstairs, Caleb had already moved. Quiet as a cat, that boy. He knew something was wrong. I had taken him to the range last year, taught him to respect firearms, to never touch without permission, lest we were under real threat. In that moment, he decided this was real enough. The safe was biometric fingerprint only. Caleb knew how to open it. He pulled out the registered pistol we kept for emergencies and chambered around like I taught him. Downstairs, Tanya whispered into the phone, there's a man in our house. He says he's from the HOA. He's not. He's not right. The dispatcher responded quickly. No HOA representative has the authority to enter homes, ma'am. Stay hidden. Officers are on their way. I tried to block Rick's path. You need to stop right there, I said. Police are coming. His face twisted. You called the cops on me? His voice dropped into a growl. You really want to play it that way? He reached toward something clipped on his belt, what looked like a zip tie or maybe a weapon hand. That's when a voice echoed down the stairwell. Get out now, Caleb said, his voice calm, strong, and terrifyingly adult, or I shoot. Froze mid-step, his head turned sharply. Who said that? Snapped, looking toward the darkened stairwell. Then he laughed, a cruel low sound. You let your little boy handle your home security? He mocked. Real brave, Dad. But I could hear the hesitation in his voice. Something shifted in his posture. He wasn't expecting a kid to be armed. He didn't know how to handle it. You've got 5 seconds, Caleb said. His voice was unwavering. Leave our house. Rick's hand hovered near his belt. Heart pounded. I didn't know if he was going to rush the stairs, pull something out, or just try to bluff his way through. All I knew was I needed to keep his eyes on me and buy enough time for the police to show up. "You've made a big mistake," Rick growled at me, still trying to sound in control. "I'm filing charges. Interference with HOA enforcement." Is another step toward the stairs, and a deafening bang filled the house. Wood splintered as Caleb fired a warning shot into the wall beside him. The crack echoed like thunder. Rick dropped to one knee, ducking behind the armchair. His whole body language shifted. He wasn't the predator anymore. He was hunted. I couldn't believe it. My son had just pulled the trigger, not to kill, just to warn. But the message was clear. "You're not going any farther. Get out of our house," Caleb shouted again, this time louder. Tanya let out a sob in the closet. I looked at Rick now, sweating, his ego and confidence leaking out. Faster than the blood would have if that bullet had hit him. Rick started crawling backward toward the door. I'm going," he stammered. "This is a misunderstanding. I'm allowed to be here." But he stayed low. I could tell he wasn't sure if Caleb would fire again. Now made two of us. Then we heard it, the sound we'd all been waiting for. Sirens. Multiple blue and red lights flickered through the front window. Tires screeched outside, doors slammed, and boots, lots of them, pounded against the pavement. "Police!" a voice boomed. "Hands up! Everyone inside, hands up!" Rick bolted toward the back hallway, but the door crashed open behind him. 3 officers in full gear stormed the living room. I dropped the bat immediately, raising my hands. "I'm the homeowner," I yelled. "That man is the intruder." Tanya burst out of the closet, hands raised, tears on her cheeks. "He's lying. We called 911. Please don't shoot." The officers didn't hesitate. They tackled Rick mid-run, dragging him to the ground. His fake badge clattered across the floor. One officer picked it up, examined it, and muttered, "This thing's not even real." Footsteps approached the stairs. One of the younger officers looked up toward Caleb's room. "Kid?" he called out gently. "You can come down now, it's over." Caleb appeared at the top, pale and shaking, still holding the pistol, but with both hands pointed safely down. Another officer carefully met him halfway, taking the weapon and whispering something I couldn't hear. My boy nodded. In less than 10 minutes, our lives had changed forever. And somehow, it was my 12-year-old son who stood between that man and something far worse. "You let your little boy handle your protection now? Out." Rick's voice echoed through the dimly lit living room, sharp and mocking. He was still trying to dominate the moment, but something had shifted. The arrogance in his tone didn't match the flicker of doubt now visible in his eyes. Caleb's voice from upstairs had frozen. Him in place, clear, commanding, and dangerously calm. It was the kind of voice that didn't bluff, and Rick, despite his theatrics, sensed that too. I stepped forward, hands out, trying to ease the pressure. "Look, man, this has gone too far. You need to walk out of here right now. No one needs to get hurt." But Rick wasn't listening. His eyes flicked toward the staircase again, jaw tight, breathing heavy. Then suddenly, with a grunt of rage, he lunged forward straight toward the stairs, like he was trying to call Caleb's bluff or take him by surprise. Before I could even yell for him to stop, a thunderous bang tore through the air. The drywall beside Rick's shoulder exploded in a burst of plaster. The sound was deafening. Now Rick dropped like a stone, his hand flying to the wall for balance.
Yes.
He hit the ground hard, gasping, completely caught off guard. Silence followed, sharp and heavy. You could feel the weight of what just happened settle over the room. Rick crouched behind the couch now, eyes wide, muttering curses under his breath. He hadn't expected resistance, and definitely not from a 12-year-old. "Crazy little punk," he hissed, ducking lower. "You could have killed me," clutched the side of his head, hands trembling. He was rattled, now angry, confused, but no longer in control. I looked toward the stairs. "Caleb, stay where you are," I called up, heart pounding. "Don't move. You did good. Just stay still now." My voice was steady, but my hands were shaking. Tanya was still whispering into the phone in the closet, feeding the dispatcher every detail. "He's hiding now," she said. "He got shot at. Yes, the boy. My son," he warned him. Rick, crouched and sweating, tried to get his bearings. His voice rose again, frantic, louder this time, like he was trying to reclaim the scene. "You're all in violation of the HOA's Emergency Compliance Act. This isn't over." File, but it was clear he didn't even believe what he was saying anymore. His threats were unraveling, desperation leaking through every word. Then he reached toward his waist. I saw it. Fast. Like a reflex. His hand darting under the vest. Maybe for a weapon or something to intimidate. Caleb didn't hesitate. Another blast rang out, and Rick's arm jerked back with a scream. He fell backward with a thud, clutching his upper forearm. A blood stained his sleeve, dark and spreading fast. "You shot me," he howled, writhing on the floor. "The kid shot me." I couldn't see Caleb's face from where I stood, but I could hear his voice again. "Don't reach for anything," he warned, colder than I'd ever heard. "Next, one's in your chest." Rick didn't move. He was whimpering now, curled near the fireplace, holding his arm like a wounded animal. Everything about him, the fake authority, the swagger, was gone. What was left was a man exposed, cornered, weak, and Caleb had done that. My 12-year-old son, who'd never been in a real fight, had just neutralized a full-grown man breaking into our home. The flashing lights appeared outside in that moment, dancing across the curtains red and blue, cutting through the dark like salvation. Rick noticed too. He groaned, trying to pull himself toward the back door. "No, no, no. No," he mumbled, crawling. "Not like this. I'm not going to jail." But Caleb was already tracking him. From the landing above, he moved silently, carefully, just enough to keep the man in sight. I called to Tanya. "They're here. Tell them the door's unlocked." Seconds later, it burst open with force. The front entryway flooded with light. And footsteps. Police on the ground. Hands where we can see them. I dropped the bat immediately and raised both hands. "I'm the homeowner," I shouted, voice shaking. The man on the floor, he broke in. Tanya threw the closet door wide open, hands raised, and rushed toward the officers. "That's my husband. That man's not with any HOA. Please. Our son's upstairs. He's got a firearm, but he's not a threat. He protected us." Guns lowered just slightly. One officer pinned Rick down as he tried to roll away, shouting, "I'm law enforcement. I'm part of the compliance unit." But they weren't buying it. A second officer picked up the badge Rick had dropped and inspected it, his face twisted with disbelief. "This isn't even a real agency," he muttered. More officers streamed into the house, securing every corner, shouting room clear after room clear. One approached the base of the stairs. "Kid, it's okay now. Come on down real slow." I turned to the stairs, and there was Caleb, pale eyes, glassy but steady, walking slowly down with the pistol pointed safely to the floor, index finger off the trigger. An officer met him halfway, took the weapon gently, and nodded to him like he wasn't just a boy, but something more. Something people weren't ready for. "Are you all right?" the officer asked him softly. Caleb nodded once. I didn't want to shoot him. Rick was screaming obscenities from the floor. His blood was soaking the carpet. They'd already cuffed him, pressed him down with a knee. He was still spitting out threats and nonsense about regulations and bylaws. The officers didn't respond to any of it. One simply said, "We're going to need an ambulance for this one, and probably a psych evil." Another turned to me. "Do you know this man? Never seen him before in my life?" I answered. He kicked the door in, said he was HOA enforcement. Came in shouting about porch lights, threatened to detain me, said he had authority to search the house. The officer looked back toward Rick. "He's got multiple sets of fake ID in his vest, none of them real. We've had reports of someone like this bothering other homes. You're lucky. Your boy probably saved your lives tonight." Lucky. That's what they called it. But all I could do was watch Caleb standing near the staircase now, finally starting to tremble as the adrenaline wore off. He looked so small again, just a boy in pajamas, barefoot on the hardwood floor. But something had changed in him. It's on all of us. The paramedics arrived to take Rick away. He was still screaming, mostly nonsense now about people needing to follow rules, about how the HOA let him down. I watched them strap him down to a stretcher. They'd stop the bleeding. But they couldn't fix whatever was broken inside that man. Caleb didn't say much after that. He sat with a blanket around his shoulders while two officers spoke to him gently, offering water, asking if he was hurt. He just shook his head. Tanya hugged him like she'd never let go. I couldn't stop thinking about the moment Rick rushed the stairs, the moment Caleb warned him, the crack of the gun, and how calm he'd stayed when everything around us was unraveling. That night changed the story of our family. It rewrote what we thought fear looked like, and what courage could sound like from the mouth of a 12-year-old boy. Rick Slater was loaded into the ambulance under heavy watch, one arm bound in bloody gauze, his wrists locked in cuffs. His cries had shifted from wild threats to pathetic moans, but none of it mattered anymore. By the time the ambulance doors shut, the charges were already stacking up, presiding a law enforcement officer. Unlawful entry, threatening a minor, and attempted kidnapping. Attempted kidnapping. Just saying those words out loud made Tanya's face drain of color. It wasn't until the paperwork started that we realized how close we had come to something far worse. At the hospital, Rick continued to protest, claiming he had the right to enter, that he was enforcing HOA codes. But his story unraveled quickly. Not only was he never employed by our HOA, but when contacted, the actual board sent out a public statement that stunned the entire neighborhood. We have no association, past or present, with Rick Slater. He was never hired, contracted, or approved to act on behalf of our organization. And just like that, the man who burst into our home shouting about porch light, violations and fines became nothing more than a violent stranger in a stolen vest. The fallout, however, was just beginning. Within hours, doorbell cam footage leaked. Our neighbor across the street had a Nest cam pointed directly at our door. The grainy night vision captured everything: the crash of the door, Rick shouting, my panicked voice, and most chilling of all, Caleb's warning from the top of the stairs. The audio was crisp. Get out now or I shoot. A clip just 8 seconds long made its way onto local forums and Twitter, and by morning, national headlines. 12-year-old defends family against fake cop boy, hero protects parents. From armed intruder kid stops midnight madman with dad's gun. It was surreal. Watching our nightmare play out on morning shows and reaction channels, everyone had an opinion: praise, outraged curiosity. Some blurred Caleb's name and face, others didn't bother. The attention was instant and overwhelming. A local news anchor came by our house 2 days later. She wanted a full interview, but we declined. Caleb wasn't ready. Instead, we allowed one carefully controlled segment, his voice altered, his face hidden. Even then, the public loved him. One teacher sent us an email titled, "To the bravest student we've never met." The principal from a nearby middle school called him a young hero. Meanwhile, kids at his actual school started calling him Protector. Caleb, some meant it sincerely. Others said it like a joke. He noticed still, things didn't go back to normal. Not even close. Detectives kept digging into Rick Slater's background, and what they found chilled us further. He wasn't just a random lunatic. He used to live in a neighborhood just one county over where he had been part of their HOA security committee. That is, until he was removed for erratic behavior and unauthorized patrols, apparently. He'd started acting like a one-man neighborhood police force. Doorbell footage, witness statements, and old security logs showed a pattern. Rick knocking on doors late at night, making threats about mailbox heights or flag placements, carrying a fake badge even then. After he was ousted, he didn't stop. He just moved on. Dressed the part, printed his own IDs, and roamed different suburbs at night, looking for homes that didn't match his imagined rule book. We weren't his first stop, but we were the first to stop him. In the days that followed, more families came forward. A woman 3 streets over said Rick had approached her 2 months earlier, demanding to inspect her backyard fencing. A retired veteran down the hill admitted Rick showed up at 2:30 a.m. once, asking to survey his power meter. No one had reported him. They were scared, unsure, convinced maybe it was legitimate even if it felt wrong. We had broken that silence, or rather Caleb had. Still inside our home, the emotional aftershocks began to rise. We started family counseling within the week. Tanya especially couldn't sleep. Every creak or car door outside sent her straight into defense mode. One night, she stood in the hallway from midnight until sunrise, holding her phone like a weapon. Caleb's counselor said he was processing the trauma with a quiet kind of maturity, not bottling it up, but not really speaking either. When asked if he felt scared that night, he answered plainly, "Yes, but I felt more scared of what would happen if I did nothing." He never bragged. He never smiled when people called him brave. Yeah. He just nodded and changed the subject. Online, of course, everything was louder. The debates were vicious. On one side were people praising Caleb, calling him a symbol of responsibility, courage, and calm under pressure. Others were outraged. "A kid with a gun? What kind of household is this?" Someone tweeted. "America's broken if a 12-year-old needs to shoot someone in his own living room." Podcasts and cable shows picked up the story. Some twisted it into a political lightning rod. Others tried to dissect our parenting. But when I was invited onto a parenting podcast, I finally spoke my mind. I didn't raise a shooter. Said I raised a protector. My son didn't go looking for trouble. Trouble came crashing through our door. And he responded with the kind of restraint, courage, and clarity that most adults can't summon in panic. They played that quote on multiple channels. Some agreed. Others mocked. I didn't care. I'd seen what Caleb had done with my own eyes. And I knew none of those people would have survived it better. Meanwhile, the HOA 301 came. Under scrutiny, people wanted answers. If Rick wasn't with them, why did so many residents assume he was? Why didn't the board warn the community about fake enforcers like him? And what kind of systems let a man like Rick impersonate an authority? Figure with no challenge? One board member quit. Two others released panicked statements claiming they'd never heard of Rick until the news broke. But residents weren't satisfied. A petition circulated, demanding a full audit of HOA practices and emergency enforcement protocols. At least 3 families threatened legal action not against us, but against the HOA, for failing to ensure a safe and clear enforcement chain. The lines between justice, safety, and power had blurred. What began as a fake cop kicking in our door had now become a community reckoning, a deeper conversation about trust, fear, and the false symbols we obey without question. At night, our house was quieter. The new door had a stronger frame. We installed a reinforced security system and better cameras. Tanya still checked every lock twice before bed. Caleb kept the same quiet routine: homework, games, dinner. But sometimes I'd catch him staring out the window a little longer than usual, like he was listening for something. When people called us lucky, I knew what they meant. We were alive. Rick was in custody. No innocent blood had spilled on our floor. But luck wasn't the word that stuck with me. What we had, what we owed everything to, was preparation.com, and a 12-year-old boy who refused to freeze in fear. The world around us kept spinning, louder than ever. But inside our home, we moved forward with a new kind of stillness. We weren't just a family anymore. We were survivors. We were witnesses. And Caleb was the reason we could tell the story at all. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Not in temperature, but in energy. Like it refused to forget the violence that had led us here. Rick Slater walked in wearing a county-issued jumpsuit, his right arm still in a sling. The gauze was gone, but the damage remained a deep graze, from a bullet that, frankly, could have ended him. He didn't look so confident now. The vest, the fake badge, the barking orders all replaced by shackles and silence. His lawyer mumbled something about intentions misread, about an overzealous man trying to maintain community order. But the judge didn't buy it. Nobody did. Rick's expression flickered smug for a moment, then blank. When asked to speak, he said, "I was just trying to help enforce order. That neighborhood has problems. I thought I could stop them." He said it without apology, without ownership. Like we were the problem, not him. But the judge wasn't having it. Her voice was measured but sharp, slicing through his defense. Like glass, you impersonated an officer. You broke into a home in the middle of the night. You threatened a father. You endangered a child, and you had no authority. No right. She looked down, paused, then back up. Bail is denied. That was the moment we all exhaled. It's not because we hated Rick, but because for the first time in months, the law finally felt like it was on our side. It's not twisted by loopholes, not confused by technicalities. Just clear, honest, and just. Caleb wasn't in the courtroom that day. We asked if he wanted to be. He said no. He didn't want to see Rick again. I already saw what I needed to, he told us. But he did give a statement, one we read aloud on his behalf. Tanya held the paper, hands trembling, stood beside. Her one hand on her back, she read every word with a voice that cracked only once. I didn't want to hurt him, but I wasn't going to let him hurt my family. Remembered what my dad taught me. I acted because I had to, that's all. Simple, honest, not brave for the sake of it. After that, the legal side began to move quickly. Rick's lawyer tried to argue mental instability, but the evidence crushed that. Old footage, witnesses, his own statements. The court sentenced him to several years for impersonation, criminal trespass, and threatening a minor. The kidnapping charge didn't stick the way we thought it would, but it didn't matter. He wouldn't be walking our streets anytime soon. Meanwhile, real change finally came to the neighborhood. The HOA, rattled by public pressure and an online petition that reached nearly 40,000 signatures, dismantled their board. Not one of the original members remained. In their place came new leadership, transparent, diverse, and accountable. They banned any form of independent enforcement and introduced a licensed, limited security team with clear training oversight and body cams. We attended the first open community meeting under the new board. For the first time, people weren't just talking about landscaping or mailbox heights. They were talking about safety, about trust, about accountability. And yet, the memory still lingered in our home. I didn't want to stay frozen in it, so I did something about it. I took all that anger, that fear, that sleepless energy, and built something out of it. I launched a nonprofit called Safe House, Strong Home. Our mission was twofold: protect homeowners' rights from abuse by overreaching HOAs, and provide youth-focused firearm safety programs for families. It's not to glorify weapons, but to prepare kids the right way, if they ever found themselves in the kind of nightmare Caleb had lived through. We started small flyers, meetings, workshops. Word spread. I was invited to speak at a town hall 2 counties over. Then, a city safety expo, and a state-level homeowners conference. At each event, I didn't just talk about Rick. I talked about what comes next. About awareness, preparation, courage. Caleb stayed away from the spotlight. But one afternoon, about 6 months after the incident, he asked if we could go to the range. I wasn't sure how to feel. Part of me hoped he never wanted to touch a weapon again. Another part understood why he did. We drove out together, just him and me, and for the first few minutes, he didn't speak. He just held the training pistol, hands steady. When he finally fired, he exhaled, not like someone bracing for a fight, but like someone letting go. Afterwards, in the car, he looked at me and said, "I don't want to be scared of it, Dad. I just want to be ready." It's that moment, quiet and heavy, felt like a turning point. He wasn't preparing for violence. He was healing from it. A year passed. The seasons rolled over our lawn like nothing had happened. But the change inside us stayed. Our home had new locks, reinforced doors, motion lights, and a smart camera system linked directly to the police department.
Nice.
But more importantly, we had a new rhythm, a calmness we'd fought to reclaim. Tanya went back to work part-time. Caleb took up art sketching comic panels with storylines about small heroes with big responsibility. And I kept working with our nonprofit, turning pain into purpose. On the anniversary of that night, a news crew reached out again. They wanted a follow-up story. Where are they now? Sort of thing. We declined, but we watched the segment. Quietly when it aired, it showed Rick Slater's prison photo, the updates from the court, and the new community safety initiatives that had blossomed in our neighborhood. But the piece ended with something I hadn't expected, a quote from my podcast interview months ago. I never wanted my son to face a moment like that. But in the darkest hour, he didn't flinch. He stood up for all of us. Hearing that again hit me harder than the first time, because it was true. In our darkest hour, when the system was too slow, when the locks failed and the police were too far, Caleb was there. And he didn't run. He didn't break. He didn't become someone else. He became exactly who we raised him to be. That night, we sat around the dinner table. Just the three of us. We didn't talk about what happened. We didn't need to. Danya reached out and held Caleb's hand. He looked up, gave a small smile, then passed the mashed potatoes like nothing had changed. But I knew better. Our story wasn't about guns or courts or headlines. It was about the moment you decide who you are when no one else can choose for you. It was about courage that doesn't come with age, but with heart. It was about a boy who didn't wait for permission to protect what mattered. And if there's one thing I learned, one truth I will never unlearn, it's this: sometimes the smallest defender holds the biggest courage.